All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this month's new demos that we have got going, and we have with us Ian from iNav4Ui with a great demo. This is born from a cruising background. It's navigation, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm going to turn it right over to him so he can tell us all the good things here.
Yeah, well, hi. So as you can see, my name is Ian Cameron. I work alongside iNav4Ui. I actually have a screen share here. I'll just turn it on. I promise not to do death by PowerPoint. That's the worst thing I could possibly do. But here we are. I do have a couple of quick slides just to summarize things because pictures and 1,000 words and all that. So yeah, I'm here representing Zora, iNav4Ui's sort of initial product, if you like. And the emphasis of Zora, or the focus, is all around the idea of one platform. That is to say that, oh, well, actually, before I get into that, I'll just say who I am. As I said, Ian Cameron. I'm on a vessel, SV Indioko. It's a 47-foot cat, and we've just completed our crossing. So we took 3 years all in to go from Panama all the way across now to New Zealand. So I'm sitting in Whangarei in New Zealand. We took kind of longest zigzaggy route we possibly could, with a bit of a pit stop in French Polynesia. We spent 2 years there in the end. Did a full double engine refit on our boat, amongst other repairs and frantic patching up that anyone who's going to be crossing from the Americas across are going to discover. It's a lot of fun keeping your boat in one piece when you're in the middle of the ocean. I'll say that. So yeah, that's pretty much me. If you recognize me at all, it's because we have got a YouTube channel as well. Along with my wife Brownie, do a YouTube channel called Red Seas. I'd say 6 years we've been sailing, and the last three or so have been spent in the Pacific. So yeah, if you want to see anything about Zora in the wild, we feature Zora a lot through our episodes, simply because it's part of our life now. Zora's part of the boat. Zora is almost the personality of our boat, so it comes through a lot in those videos. As I was saying, Zora, the focus is the idea that everything should just work, and everything should work in one space, which is kind of the vital component. Zora was actually born from the CEO of the company, Olivier Hendricks. He's sailed, well, pretty much everywhere, to be honest. Started out in the Mediterranean. He worked down through South America, Patagonia, the Magellan Strait, and then did a full lap of the Pacific all the way back to, well, Canada, actually. And in that time, he brought together lots of ideas and lots of creations to create ultimately Zora. Um, what it's from is this idea of information overload. Now, we all love displays on our boats. Many of us will have more than one. Some will have iPads, chart plotters, individual gauges for depth, speed, etc., etc. And this can cause information overload. It is possible to end up looking more at your displays than you do at your sails and at the world around about you. And we get carried away with iPads where we can build lots and lots of gauges that we have to stare at all day long and hunt down which ones we need at which point in our sailing passage. So quite often when something goes wrong, you're frantically looking at different gauges and different sets of information. This causes something that is kind of recognized as inattention blindness. The way I always remember this is when I learned to drive, my driving instructor pointed out that you get in the habit, you look at your mirrors and then you take your maneuver, right? And if you don't actually pay attention to what's in those mirrors, you steer right into a car. And this kind of applies in the same world when it comes to instrumentation on a boat, as I'm sure we all know. You can spend more time staring at a number, having had 1.5 hours sleep in the middle. It's always in the middle of the night when things go wrong. So, 2 in the morning, and you're staring at a number, just trying to work out, well, is that number good or is that bad? Or did I take the reef? Does it matter that that wind has just climbed? Trying to assess all that data whilst you're tired is just a horrible thing to do on passage. And so Zora tries to address that, not by doing anything for you, but rather acting like a first mate, a system that kind of taps you on the shoulder if you're missing something. So if you're the perfect sailor, nothing's wrong. You're going to have an easy time. Zora's going to sit silently. You're not even going to have to look at the screen because you're enjoying the wind in your hair and away you go. But if you're tired, like I often get on longer passages, it's handy to have somebody just there going, by the way, the wind has been climbing for the last 30 minutes and you've only got one reef in. You might want to take another one. That's the essence of what Zora's aiming to do. Takes all of this data that we have from all these different protocols that we love to use. So NMEA being the most obvious one, that's where all our wind data comes from, for example. There's also Modbus, there's digital switching, there's battery monitoring through Victron and others. All of these different platforms, we bring them into a piece of hardware. This is the Zora server or core, and that's where Zora lives. Zora is an operating system running on a computer, essentially. And from that, we can then access it from any device we have and as many devices as we like, all unique. So we can have a phone running down in the cabin when you're not on watch. You could have an iPad running at your nav station. You could have a dedicated screen perhaps at your helm. And you could be pulling up, I don't know, 5 other phones across the boat so all the crew members can be checking in on what's going on the weather. It doesn't matter, you're all individual, you're not copying screens or any of that kind of stuff. It's all unique examples and as many logins as you like. That's the death by PowerPoint. We're going to show you the more fun part, the actual system. So I'll just switch over here. Bear with me as I get the screen share to jump across. Where's it gone? All right, so here we are. I've just got a Chrome browser that I'm going to share with you. So this could be any browser you like. As I say, it could be any device you have with internet access, or not even internet, excuse me, with a browser. Zora doesn't run on the internet, it runs offline. So if we have an iPhone or an Android or a tablet, whatever you like, but today we'll use Chrome just for ease. Now, forgive me, I've got various boxes here as we're streaming, so there might be a couple of moments I move boxes around to get them out of my way, but I'll just shift this one down here for now. Okay, so you might be looking at a bunch of gauges and thinking, Ian, did you not just say it's not about the gauges? Essentially, Zora is, well, this initial screen on Zora is called our PND, so our primary navigation display. And it takes all of those displays and gauges I showed you in those images and kind of brings them down into this one slightly sci-fi looking display. So I'll give you a quick tour just to get an idea of what you're seeing, and then I'll explain why you actually never look at it, which sounds a bit counterproductive, but you'll understand. Um, Essentially, what we have here is a standard compass, as you'd expect. That's around the outside there. This compass will display on top of it our true wind and our apparent wind. That's these 2 arrows over here on the right at the moment. So our wind is coming from the north. Obviously, when we're sailing, those would slightly deviate from each other because technically the apparent wind is always going to be forward of true, that kind of thing. Well, when you're beating into it at least. And then down the center here, we've actually got a couple of numbers to look at. So we have our heading. Over on the left, you have our heading magnetic and our variation. Our apparent wind is displayed as a number as well, as is the speed, obviously. And then we have this virtual horizon. So this does actually, what do you call it, tilt, as it were, based on the tilt of the boat, the lean of the boat. So if you're on a great heel, you can see how many degrees you're heeled over, and your horizon will artificially move to show you that. We then have, also I should mention, the position of this vessel in the center will actually migrate based on how far off course you get from your track as well. So if you're setting yourself a destination, a route, it'll actually show you when the vessel's drifting off course by drifting the vessel off course. If you have your engines running, I'm a catchman, as I said, so I've got 2 propellers, but you could have up to 4 different screws on your boat, and they will actually rotate when your engines are running, which is kind of nice. So you can see if you've got an engine underway. Then below the water line, which is our horizon, you'll notice everything above is everything to do with the air. Everything below is everything to do with the water. So we have our depth below keel, which we've entered the offset, so we know exactly what's below the keel, not below the water line. It's kind of more convenient for us. Speed through water. Over to the right, I'll just mention this is actually indicating the state of the tide. So our tide is currently on its way down. The tiny little green and red there you can see is actually a rudder indication. So you can see left to right rudder, port starboard rudder, I should say, really, and then our speed over ground at the bottom. All of that is very graphic-y and very fancy, but it's all condensed into one simple compass display. I mentioned you wouldn't actually look at this, and that's because Zora is based around 3 basic notifications, essentially. So if everything's going well as it is right now, then really we don't see anything at all. We see a bit of blue here, which is just to inform us that the water is there. But let's say we want to set some alarms, and I'll show you how these 3 colors come into play. So we don't have very much wind here at 5 in the morning, unfortunately, but let me click into here. I'll just tap on our wind speed, and you'll see you get a history graph of the wind over the last 10 minutes. Wow, there really has been no wind. And you can see our maximum and minimum are indicated already. So 3.6 knots max wind speed. It's really sheltered in here. And 0.6 knots is our lowest over the last 10 minutes. And we can average this from slow to immediate. That's easy done. And if I want to set any alarms, I simply click in the area above or below. and it highlights yellow. That means I've set this alarm for 3.6 knots, so I'll get notified if the wind goes above that. So let's just put that in context. We've set sail, we're trimming, we're quite happy. Okay, everything seems settled. It's time to whip out a coffee or to settle in. So I'm going to leave the helm for 2 seconds. I'll just tap here because the average wind should be a good indicator that I've set everything to the average wind. Tap an alarm and away I can go. So now Zora knows the wind state in which to trigger an alarm. I'll falsify one here just by tapping on the plus or minus, and I can bring it below our current averages. Wow, there really isn't a wind. And you'll see it highlighted at that point because we've gone below the set alarm. I'm really having to set this very low to get it to trigger. And what will happen is Zora will then notify us when there's a wind change, and the alarm will change by, will signify by showing us an alarm box along the top, and we can have an audible alarm as well. I think I actually disabled my alarm now that I'm demonstrating this. Let me just have a look here. Indeed, yeah. So you can see we've got an above wind speed. It's turned yellow. So I've not been looking at my screen. I've been busy getting a coffee. There'll be an audible alarm. I've muted it for the sake of our demo. And I can just glance at the screen in my peripheral vision and I can see yellow, which means there's something I need to pay attention to. So that's our yellow-based alarm. We have a red-based alarm, and that means essentially you must do something. So the way I look at it is blue is information, yellow is a warning, and red is an alarm. So warning, you might want to do something. Our wind is picking up, and you can see it's just dropped below our threshold, so our alarm has gone away. And red would mean, no, actually, you need to take action now because something's about to happen. Typically, that would be like running aground, for example. Um, if I click over here, over here, I can bring up our toolbar on the right-hand side. And if we had any active notifications, I could actually read them off here. So if there's more than one thing going on, not only will I get the yellow or red bar across the top here, but I'll get a list of notifications down the right-hand side. Of course, our wind is just dipped below my threshold again, so hard to demonstrate that, but I think you get the idea. I can also set a low wind alarm. And lastly, if I want to, I can set a more accurate above and below limit by typing in a value. So you can be very precise if you wish to be, but to be honest, in most cases, a simple tap gets you the alarm you're looking for. And then obviously more details by clicking in. You can go up to 8 hours of wind history. We can do the same for depth. Our depth hasn't really changed. We've been sat here on a pile mooring for the last few while, but you can see it's over 30 minutes, slowly but surely, the tide is shifting. The depth is getting shallower because, as I said, the tide is on its way down. And then I'll just finish off this area of saying you also notice these corners. So we have our GPS in the bottom left. And yes, we can bring out the satellite views if you want to see how many satellites you're connected to. While I'm in here, we have sun and moon. So you can see the phase of the moon. You can see when the sunset and sunrise is going to be quite handy on a long night passage to know just how long you have to hold on before sunrise. And typically we would have our moon phase showing on top of our sun here. So we can see when they overlap. Um, Again, handy for passage planning, that kind of thing. And then I'll just slide this window out of the way here. And then lastly, we'll show you the tide so we can check our tide pattern over time. We can also do that across a calendar. So we can actually open up and say, well, what's the tide going to be in over the next 2 weeks? And it'll load us up a crazy tide pattern. And we can monitor what's happening over the course of a longer period of time. We actually draw a bit of an algorithm here, slightly AI-esque thing. We draw on multiple tide buoys or tide data available, and we can triangulate to where the boat actually is. So this is an interpreted tide graph. That's a hard thing to say. That gives you an idea of exactly what the tide should be doing where you are. So neat little tools to have available to you at any time. And then lastly, I'll just mention it because it's here, we do have the ability to control autopilots. So if you've got your autopilot connected to your network, which most people realistically will, you can control in all the usual methods. I'll just put I didn't unlock my helm before we started, so this might be a bit regrettable. In fact, I'll demonstrate this a different way. So this is controlling our autopilot. We actually created a different kind of autopilot called semi-auto as well. So you can see here, I have a Raymarine autopilot connected on Enemy 2000. Semi-auto is kind of a handy tool, particularly if your autopilot fails, or if you're just wanting to stay on course, save a bit of battery power, that kind of thing. This is essentially an autopilot, but only in visuals. So if I set up a wind angle autopilot, you'll notice this little blue notch has appeared, and I now need to try and keep my apparent wind pointing into my blue notch. And as the wind will drift, you'll see these bars up here to the port and starboard will start to appear. And that's literally telling me at the helm which way to turn the wheel to stay on course. So again, as you saw, I just went out too far out of my track there and I got a red notification for a second. Turn the wheel back, we're back on track. Essentially, this is if your autopilot fails or if you're, I don't know, having to do some maintenance on it in midway through a passage. This is a
Alarm.
method. Oh, there's an audible alarm for you.
Autopilot failure.
There we go. So that's telling me I failed, sadly, because I was in semi-auto. So it's a handy tool to have. It functions in exactly the same way you'd expect any autopilot to work. You can set your course and heading. You can do tacks, and it'll tell you which way to turn the wheel, that kind of thing. All sitting built into Zora, alongside a traditional autopilot control, which would just be switching back to the Raymarine. Um, a little side note here. One of the things we found that was really cool about the semi-autopilot is if you're working with a wind vane, semi-autopilot is a way to have Zora monitoring your wind vane for you. So if you set up semi-autopilot, set up a wind heading, shall we say, wind angle, should you turn up in a high breeze, Zora will actually set off that alarm saying autopilot failure. It might stir you from your bunk. You can run outside, take over the helm without having to do anything at all, get the wind back under control, the vane takes over, let go, carry on. So it's kind of an accidental invention that came along with this semi-auto feature. But I slightly digress, to be honest. That is the essence of the PND. The idea that you can set very quick alarms. The system will notify you through a color and an audible alarm means actually I spend very little time looking at this screen. I spend most of my time looking at what I'm doing, looking around the world, checking on the boat, checking on the maintenance. One example we had was somebody was sailing along for a couple of days straight, and then they just had this moment of thought, which was, I should check at the front of my furler because I have a feeling something might be coming loose. And because they had the capacity to think about it, Zora took over. They could wander forward, and then they noticed, yeah, indeed, one of the grub screws, I suppose they're called, on their furling drum was coming out, and they almost lost their forestay because of it. So it was a way to free up that brain capacity. Now, again, the system isn't doing anything for you. Zora will never do anything. It'll only notify you about things. So if everything's well, you don't even look at the system. So there we go. We have color alarms. We have a very simple PND. You might be thinking, wow, what's all the fuss about? I can understand that. That's because there's an awful lot more packed into Zora. And we can get there by heading up to our screens window here. Now, I should explain this particular screen. You'll see there's a variety of different tabs here. We can navigate around Zora this way. We can jump between our PND, dedicated AIS screens, typical radar style AIS, which we can zoom in and out of. We can drag it around the screen. We can bring up our AIS list. We do have a couple of different things for weather. I'll get into that in a moment. And then you'll obviously see charts. But I want to explain this screen here, the DNS, Dynamic Navigation Screen. So this is where Zora kind of steps out of the mainstream, if you like. So Zora operates on something called vessel state, which might be an unusual term. Vessel state essentially means Zora understands if we are sailing, motoring, anchoring, docking, moored, mooring, anchored. I didn't say that one yet because we were anchoring before. Drifting, you name it, vessel state. What is the vessel currently doing? And it dynamically shows us what we need to see in that state. So right now I'm moored, as indicated up here in vessel state, in top right corner. And my chosen screen when I'm moored is a nice little sort of top view of our boat. This is just a satellite image. Obviously, it's not real time. Someone asked me that the other day. I thought that was hilarious. We can see where we've been on our mooring. Now we're palm moored, so we're just drifting back and forward and left and right lots. We can zoom in and out on that, obviously. A couple of bits of data about tide and so on. I like to have that up. I like to have some basic switching, so control over our lights, Starlink power, better not touch that right now. And then I have chosen to put a chart up here along with a battery indicator. So this is a current state of our house battery. Now, if I just change our vessel state for a second, so let's say instead of being moored, I'm going to clear the mooring and start sailing. So right now I'm drifting because I've just cleared our mooring. Normally I'd start my engines and Zora would say, oh, you're motoring. That makes sense. But let's go and sail. So I'm just going to tap on my sails and we're going to set up the main sail at 100%. And we'll set up the Genoa to 100% because there's no wind. Now, as a result, you'll notice that the dynamic screen has changed. So instead of having that top view and the various other things about batteries and so on, I have pretty much all I need to see here. I've got my PND, And I've got my chart, which again, of course, I can zoom in and out on. Um, I can see all of my AIS targets. Because it's a chart, I also have points of interest here. And you'll notice right now I actually have a weather overlay, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment. And then down the right-hand side, I can see, well, particularly while I'm sailing, these areas where I turned on what sails I have these kind of power bars. Um, Now, I don't really know the right name to give these, but essentially that's what they are. They show us the window of operation for my Genoa at 100% and my mainsail at 100. Now, if I reef, this power bar will adjust to match reef 2. Now, it's difficult to demonstrate when there's no wind, of course, but you'll notice the power bar drops all the way down and it probably even turns, yeah, blue, indicating to me that, and there's a notification up here. I've got quite a few going on right now, but loads of AIS warnings. We'll just, I'll tell you what, I'll silence a bunch of these annoying ones and we'll just get to the one we're looking for. Uh, there we go. Sail, your Genoa may need attention because I'm sailing very inefficiently right now. Now, that would have gone yellow if it was up the other end of the power scale and there was 43, 44 knots. It would turn yellow and say, hey, warning, you might want to take a reef. Or in this case, take the Genoa down. So that power bar shows you apparent wind speed and true wind speed and the window of operation for your sail, just helping you stay more efficient in your sailing. And again, it triggers those notifications for us, which is kind of helpful along the way. We can add as many sails as we have, and we can configure those windows of operation as we please as well. So, I've just read from the manufacturer's guide as to what they recommend for reefing this catamaran. And then being typical male sailor, I've added a few knots here and there just because I like to go a little bit faster when I can. Um, Bad habits very much die hard. Now that we're sailing, that's pretty much the basics of our screen. Again, I don't need to look at it unless there's a notification. Obviously, I can keep track of my chart. I can keep track of various data points along here, and I can set my autopilot. I'm done. I'm underway. Now, I should just say while I'm here, I'll just jump back into that sail state screen. Someone asked me this the other day, and I keep forgetting to mention it, that we do have those tools for the sail power. If we're running our engines, we could see the RPM of the engine, for example, which ones are on. And this is what I got asked, which was to do with the data screen. Someone wanted the kind of more traditional numeric readout. Now, again, I'm stationary, so it's going to be a little bit hard to demonstrate here, but you would have wind apparent and wind direction. Obviously, there's so little wind, there's nothing to display here, and the same goes for speed, depth, and current. So you can have a very basic text layout. This is particularly useful on a phone. That's what I'm finding anyway. On an iPhone or an Android, you can fill the screen with this and then have the metrics available there visually. If you prefer to work that way. I mean, in my case, I actually prefer using the PND. So I actually have this usually full screen on my phone, and then I scroll down to get to my charts as my preference. And of course, it's dynamic based on horizontal or vertical as well. But I always forget to mention that data tab, so I thought I'd take a moment to mention it now. The other thing that's hiding here, and this is across all of Zora, is a brightness option. We do have the option to do automatic brightness as well. I had, I should say, a chart plotter for one of the other manufacturers, and it used to drive me nuts that if you set the dimness, the brightness of the display to low for a night passage, it didn't know to automatically brighten it up after dawn. So if you weren't paying attention, you actually couldn't find on the touchscreen where the button was to turn the brightness back up. So that kind of spawned this invention, which is essentially, yeah, Zora knows when dawn is, sunset, sunrise, and dusk, and so on. And you can then manually choose what brightness you'd like at different points in the day and then enable it by clicking here. I won't click that right now because it's 5:20 in the morning where I am, so the screen would suddenly get very dark. I'll leave that for now. But just so you know, that's hiding in there as well, which is kind of neat to see. One other thing that's here that somebody asked me again about the other day is vessel communication information. So let's say we get a VHF call from someone asking for some information about our boat. We can jump in here and we can very quickly spell out the vessel name just by tapping on it. Zulu Oscar Romeo Alpha in our case. Same goes for call signs. And if I had entered, apparently I didn't in my last update, my MMSI would be in there as well, so I can call that back as well. So all that data is very easily displayed here and very easily rattled off in a hurry. That came up again 3, 4 in the morning, getting a call when you've had very little sleep, and someone asks you to do the alphabet. You get very creative with your letters. That's all I can say. So we added that in to make life a bit easier. Anyway, back to vessel state. We're sailing at the moment, so our PND, so our dynamic screen has changed to show us what we want. Let's come and let's get anchored. Let's finish up the day. So we're going to head into anchoring mode. Just tap the button for anchoring. And again, our PND has changed. So now we do have a top view to see where we are and get a satellite image. We still have our chart, and then we over here have our PND. But over on the right, this is kind of an interesting one again. Um, I always get confused when people refer to struggling with anchoring and scopes and things because it seems quite straightforward, and Zora makes it that much easier. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to explain scope very, very simply. Let's say we were in, I don't know, 7 feet of water. Some might say a 7 foot of chain would be a one-to-one scope, when in fact, your anchor roller might be another 3 feet above the water. So actually, 10 feet of chain in 7 feet of water would be a one-to-one scope in that scenario, just as an example. Zora already knows the position of our anchor roller. It knows how much chain we have in the locker. And it obviously knows the depth below keel, and it knows the tide. So when you bring all those things together, Zora can give you an estimation of what scopes you can achieve. So I'm fairly shallow right now, so I can see I have the available scopes from 3 all the way through 7 with the amount of chain I have in the locker. I could probably go further than that, to be honest. Um, so there'll be even more scope available. But you get the sense here that you can select your scope and it will show you, okay, if you drop 16, I work in meters, 16 meters of chain will give me a 4-to-1 scope on average. But at high tide, that would only be a 3-to-1 scope. At low tide, it'd be a 4.3-to-1 scope. So I can anchor a little bit more informed than usual, particularly when the tides are quite dramatic. A lot of people would make the mistake of dropping enough chain there and then for a 5-to-1 scope, let's say. And then if they were in, if they're on the coast of Canada, for example, there's a tide pattern that's something insane. It's like a 5 meter tide pattern. You could quite easily end up with your chain not even touching the ground. So this way we can be informed when we select our scope, for example, 5-to-1. And at this point, I can see straight away, okay, I need to drop my anchor. I need to deploy 20 meters of chain in total for a 5-to-1 scope. And my anchor depth from surface to the seabed, excuse me, is only 3.9 meters. So if I'm traveling as I am with my partner, with Brandy, my wife, I can call to the forward deck and say, okay, drop 3.9 meters to the seabed. She hits go on the windlass because we're nice and lazy, drops that much chain, and she can call that, great, that's the anchor on the seabed. And we know it is because we've already got the tide and we know how much, pardon me, we know our offset for our depth below keel. If you haven't realized by now, a Scottish person talks too much and then they catch a frog in their throat. Excuse me. Ah, a welcome break to the drone of Ian. Uh, okay, as I was saying, so I've called forward, I've said drop 3.9 meters. So she's done that for me. That's perfect. Now at this point, I can say, okay, I'm going to start dropping out more chain. 8 meters, I want you to put the bridle on. And at this point, I can start backing down the boat. I'll start reversing. And once she says, yep, that's 8 meters of chain out, maybe at that point I go, you know what, actually, I've changed my mind. Let's make it a really silly scope. I want to put a 8.2 to 1 scope. Actually, put out 20 meters of chain. That feels a bit more comfortable. So she can press 20 meters of chain. Okay, attach the bridle for me. She does that. At that point, I can say, great, just put out up to 32 meters of chain. That's our total chain deploy. So we're just following the numbers on the screen here. At that point, I can say the anchor is set. And Zora says, well, typically you now want to back down on that anchor, make sure it's set properly. So here's your speed over ground. And if we had our engines running, here's the RPM of your engines. So you can actually check how much force you're putting on the anchor. You can see that your speed over ground is nominal 0. You'll probably be drifting port to starboard in the drag there, but you get an idea. And once you're happy, you hit hold. And at that point, the vessel's state has changed to anchored. And you can see that the PND has changed to show the information I like to have at anchor. Now, again, all of the PND is customizable. This is my preferences. You might not need windy on your screen here. You might not want your AIS targets on display. You might be happy enough with them on your chart as they are here. It's up to you. You can customize these screens as you please. And then obviously I like to have my PND, and I've been messing with my batteries recently, so I forgot to reattach it for this demo. Apologies. But here I'd have my house bank as you saw earlier. And then over here on the data side of things, you can see some information that's useful, like the next high and low tide are displayed. So I can see what I should be expecting. Kind of useful if, just behind us over here somewhere is a coral reef, for example. You might want to know when the next low tide is because you might well be looking at drifting towards that. On that point, we have now got one of the world's most accurate anchor alarms. And I say that kind of boldly. But the reason I say that is, as I was earlier mentioning, we already know the tides. We already know how much chain we put out. We know where the bridle's set, and we know our depth below keel. What that means is, rather than most of the apps out there, you'll say, oh, we put out 30 meters of chain. So you drag a circle to 30 meters, and then you get a radius of 30 meters. Well, that's great if your anchor was at the surface or your boat was on the seabed. Because, yeah, that's 30 meters of chain in a straight line. Zora knows that your anchor is actually at an angle. So basic trigonometry, it's not 30 meters. It might only be 28 meters if it's particularly deep. So that radius is set to the maximum your chain can go straight from the seabed up to your boat. Now, as the tide changes, that radius will get larger. And as the tide goes, oh, sorry, goes down, I should say. And as the tide goes up, that radius will get smaller. Zora will dynamically react to that. So this circle you see here will dynamically adjust based on the tide, which means we should never get a false anchor alarm. Now, that being said, someone did trip me up on that the other day. What if we reset? What if we're in a tidal path and therefore we're going from, I don't know, south to north and north back to south again? The anchor will be resetting over and over. We might drag a meter or two as the anchor's resetting, depending on what anchor you have. So we did add in a margin, and this margin can scale, and it adds an extra circle here. And we've just moved all of our alarms out, in this case by 10 meters. So you can manually add a margin for drag, if you like, as you please. If you think, oh, I don't mind, I'm going to drag around a little bit, you could add a bit more margin. But set at zeros, this radius, should I say, is going to respond to the tides, which is one of the coolest things about Zora. We've never actually had an anchor alarm that hasn't actually been because we've dragged. In the 4 years, I think, I've been testing Zora now as we've been developing it. We've been working on that to make sure it's precise. So really, really cool feature to have. And actually, I just noticed over here, we still have a flashing yellow arrow, as you can see here. And that's because we still have our sails up. So we should go in and drop our sails. Now, we can do that one at a time by hitting the down button on each sail. I'm kind of lazy, so I just tap up here in the active sail area and drop all our sails. Now, that's Zora using vessel state dynamically, changing the screen as we move from state to state, giving us the data we need at each stage of vessel state. What's really cool is all of that is being automatically logged. So our logbooks are already up to date. We know exactly when we left anchor. We know exactly what sails we had up. If we've been changing our autopilot, we know exactly what autopilot course changes we made. And all of that is hiding over here in our logbooks. So a simple tap on that, and here's a very basic example of our logbook. You can see I've set this to quite a large range, actually. This is a year of logs. It'll load about 50 entries at a time, and then it'll load the next 50 over and over again. And you can see here I've got autopilot changes and all sorts going on. It's quite a lot of data to see. Now, just for the sake of showing you what we've got, if I tap here, we can bring up exactly where we were at the time, what speed we were doing, course of our ground, apparent wind speed, depth below keel, heading true, and apparent wind angle, excuse me. All stored right there in our logbook, automatic. Obviously, I didn't enter that myself. I can come over here and I can adjust what we can see. So I don't know, let's just see. Well, let me scroll down when it isn't autopilot for a second. There we go, sail changes. Let's do that. We'll just press and hold on sails, and then there's my sail changes that happened during this particular period of time. And I can load more. Again, it's going to load them days at a time. Nothing happened on that day. Bad example. And again, I can check what's been happening. So every single sail change, automatically logged. Every single course change, logged. We can even have people on watch. So you can see who was on watch at different points. You can calculate your shift pattern, for example. We have a couple of templates you can load up here, depending on what you want to look at as well. And all of these can be printed out. So you can create physical copies if you wish. At the end of each day, we do get these auto logs as well. So you can see how long we were moored for, how far we traveled. I've been stationary here for a little while over Christmas. So let me just, well, you get the idea. So all of that is stored in our logbooks, which is kind of convenient. And we can do, again, as I say, by calendar. We can jump particular days and so on. Up here, we can do the print preview, and then we can print hard copies if, say, where was it? I lost in the Mediterranean. There's a couple of places like Cyprus, I think it is, who ask for hard copies of your logbooks to be stored. So this is a method you could create your clip binder and store it as hard copy. We personally only operate on digital. It's much easier for us and saves us carrying a lot of paper around. So that's our preference. You might have noticed in there when I tapped on one of these circles in the center, we actually have the ability to add manual log entries as well. So we can put in here a test log, uh, and we can set the date, the time. It could be a logbook or it could be a memo. So it could be something like a reminder to repair something or to buy more food, whatever. And we can add photos. So on a laptop, like I am now, if I click add photo, it'll bring up a file finder window, and I can locate photos and add them to the log or videos and add them to the log. What I like to do is actually on my phone. Um, I normally demonstrate this when I'm in person with people. It's much easier. I'll pull up Zora on my phone, and then I can tap in this text area, and I can tap a microphone in the bottom right corner of the screen, and I can do a voice based, so voice to text logbook. So while I'm underway, I can just grab my phone, tap a button, and say, "Oh wow, we just saw dolphins. They were really cool. There must have been around 100 of them." Hit save, take a quick photo on my phone, add it using that plus photo button, and I now have a logbook entry that not only has photos, videos, and I didn't type a single word because I've had my eyes on the dolphins the whole time, which is kind of nice. So it's just an added feature that's there that you can do from a phone or a tablet, obviously. Technically, you can do it from a laptop, but you wouldn't be looking at the dolphins if you were sitting inside on your laptop. So no real point in talking about that. Simple click, we jump straight back to our PND. I've got these online maps at the moment, so I'll show you that in a second. The other thing we can do is if we press and hold on log, I can actually do what's kind of a quick entry or a preset entry. So I've created these manually, fish on, squall, and so on. So if I was just typically a fish on, I don't want to waste time. So I just click here, click fish on, and I have the GPS position that I got that fish. It's kind of nice. Later, I can go back and embellish my logbook as much as I please. Um, what I'll do is I'll jump back up to the screens window here. And I'm just going to take a moment to show you a little bit more on logbook. We have another thing called journal. It's kind of a nicer way to see logbooks. There's two views at the moment and one we're working on. So here in journal, we can bring up individual trips. So it's kind of easier to show people visually what's been happening rather than that long single timeline. This will actually show you which trips and times you anchored and moored and so on. So I can just click on a trip. Yeah, we'll use this one. Okay, so this is where we are right now. So this is just our destination. Bad example. Let me jump to a slightly more interesting trip. In fact, I'll use the last 3 months. Actually, it's last 6 months. Oh, I know why. I've moved my trips. I was like, where are they all gone? As you create these trips, we can actually store them into journeys. So typically, in our case, we would have like the passage we just did from Tonga to New Zealand. So we stopped over in Minerva Reef. It's a submerged atoll. It's kind of not quite halfway, it's probably a quarter of the way. And it's a beautiful, stunning place. But a lot of people use it as a pit stop and wait for weather. So rather than having all these individual trips to work through, I actually gathered up our departure from Tonga, our arrival in Minerva, our Minerva North, our movements in Minerva North, down to Minerva South, another atoll, and then our long run down to New Zealand. And I stored them over here in journeys. So here you can see the to New Zealand journey that we created, and it's got lots of entries. Rather than having to scroll down through those along with every other trip we've ever done, we put them all together in one place. So here we are, Minerva south from Tonga to New Zealand, Northland. So if I just click here, it's going to load up the data for that passage, or multiple passages, I suppose. You can get a nice little overview of what we did, crossing over the meridian. You can see the route we took, obviously. Over here we get some stats, so you can see how long we spent motoring. We actually motored more than we thought that passage, so we motor and motor sailed. And then we've got sailing time, anchor time, and so on, along with some maximums as well. So we saw just under 40 knots of wind. We got a nice, good bit of speed out of the boat. 13 knots over ground was great. And actually, that was matched to water. That's even better. Yeah, so it must have been going with it. So you get a nice little overview of your passage. I don't know how many logs you made on that one other than the automatic ones. Yeah, so lots of automatic logs showing us what happened on passage. 50 of 7,488 entries in our logbook. Amazing. And forgive me, I don't remember if I added any photos yet. In fact, I haven't. I haven't got around to putting my photos in. So I then have all my photo gallery here, along with videos, obviously. And then lastly, if I click on this button here in the top right of the map view, this might not be too exciting because it's mostly out in the middle of nowhere, but you can actually have a live playback of your passage along with your wind indication and speeds, and you can click and drag your way along a timeline here to see what happened. So it's just a nice way to kind of relive a passage. Normally I use an example that's got a bit more land around about because it's a bit more fun to see. But open blue water, there you go. Minerva's so underwater you don't even get to see it on a satellite chart. So that gives you an idea of some of the fun things you can do in the journals and the trips side of things as well. I'll just jump back out of that and into screens. Overview, we're still kind of playing with this at the moment, but to give you a sense of what Overview does, it gives us all the stops we've ever done. Now, we've only been playing with it recently, so I've only got the ones on the last leg here of crossing the Pacific. So otherwise, you'd have all the Caribbean and across French Polynesia and so on. But we can zoom in on our stops and see where we've stopped along the way and check our anchorages. We can also jump over to trips. And if I just come down here, I'll find a trip that's relatively useful. I think that's a trip. Yeah, there we go. So there's the end point of a trip, and there's our start point. So we can see the route we took was pretty dead straight. But again, it's a nice way to just double check what route did we take and when was that. Over here we get a bit more information, and we can open up straight into that trip. So if you're a map-based person, a chart person, you can use that way to get to the data. You can see we were testing here, so there's no visual data yet. But if you're a chart person, you can use this method, or if you prefer a text method, you can use the journals approach. And all that's just hiding here under our journal tab. One more thing I'll show you in the world of navigation, and then I'll take us over to systems side of things, which should sort of round off, and we'll get some questions if you have any. So I've shown you a lot of the things about navigation that Zora can do, and I've sort of hinted towards the charts side of things, but it's obviously one of the first things people look for is charts and what information we can glean from them. So I'll just turn this off for a moment. I'll talk about that in a second. So right now we're tucked away in New Zealand. Here's a kind of base map that shows you the shape of New Zealand. And you can see we have overlays available straight away. So we have all of these AIS targets and points of interest, and we can just click on anything you see here, and we'll get information in the top right. Click on that, we'll get more information about the vessel, if they're underway, and so on. That's kind of chart 101, pretty basic. But this chart view is pretty horrible. It's very basic. So if we just click on this layers icon, you can see all the different chart layers that we can bring up. Now, we can access all the common sources like Chart Locker, for example. It's an obvious one to start with, but there's various others that we have access to. So we can bring up your kind of classics. I think where we are in the world, we do have some Google imagery, so we can get Google Satellite. And again, this is all offline. So there's no downloading required, sorry, no live downloading, I should say. We download the chart once, it's stored locally. So we can check in on Google Maps. If you prefer, we do have access, because of Chart Locker, into things like Navionics. But we also support Aquamaps. Currently, I'm using the online version. Again, we have an encrypted handshake that allows us offline Aquamaps. The reason I like to show people Aquamaps, it's an ENC style chart, if you've not come across it. And why it's particularly interesting is, I'm just going to find a good example. I'm looking for a tricolor light. This is my navs pushed to the max. Typical, I'm not going to find one I'm looking for. Fine, I'll use a green marker. So when you've got ENC style charts, we can actually get a lot more data from them. So if I, let's say we head up the river to where we are now, in fact, okay. I'm not quite sure where the position of this red marker is, this lateral marker. So I tap on it, I can get the information straight away brought up here on the right. So it allows me to keep track of which markers I'm on. If I could find, excuse me for one moment, there's a trilite. I knew there was one somewhere to be found. Find a trilite, it'll actually tell me what angle I am to the light and what color I should be seeing. So I can see the flash pattern. I can see if it should be currently showing me white, red, or green. Now, it also points out that I'm too far away, so this navigation light is not visible, so I shouldn't be looking for it. So again, if I'm tired, I can just see here, oh no, that's not the light I think I can see. And I can then click and check around the map, the chart, excuse me, for the correct one. And then I can see a sense of visible direction as well. So from the helm, I can say, oh, this is going to be off my port side, just off my bow, in this scenario. So the same goes for red markers. It'll actually show me the blink pattern. You just noticed there probably. I don't know what the pattern of this one is, so it might take a while. 1, 2, blank. So it's just a way to kind of keep you in your situation, situational awareness, I suppose. Again, because we're using Aquamaps, you have a bit more data here just because it's kind of fun to show. Okay, here, Town Basin, there's a lot of shops and buildings around. You can actually click on any of these and it will tell you that's an alcohol shop. Good to know. And the same goes for landmarks and so on. So all this data is stored, again, offline. So we have the access to this whenever we want. Now, I'm just going to jump over here. I did use this the other day as a demonstration. Was it in this bay? If you have submerged rocks, for example, Zora knows based on your depth below keel and the tide whether or not a rock is going to be a hazard to you. So this one flashed up. It's a red hazard. It is too shallow, which means I should maintain a safe distance. Whereas if a rock is sometimes, in my case, 1.4, 1.5 meters underwater, then at high tide, it might say, well, it's a warning, it's yellow. You might want to keep your distance, but if you have to, you can get over the top of that rock. So again, charts that are real time telling you what matters to your boat in your situation. Um, I think that's particularly cool. It's something I've not seen around very much. So I always like to point out when I get the chance. So yeah, that's our Aquamaps integration, I suppose. As I said, these charts, they are all downloaded locally, so you don't need to use the internet. And I should mention, they actually live update based on where you are in the world. So you saw that long list there. If I just jump to French Polynesia, since it's a popular stop everyone can't wait to get to, if I tap on that layers list again, you'll see that the chart options have changed because the charts I was looking at don't exist here. So I can now jump over here to, I don't know, oh, the Cook Islands is a poor example. This one, the Tuamotus. And now I get satellite imagery, which is far more reliable in the Tuamotus than any normal charts are. But it means that I can zoom right in and I can check on coral heads and see that these are the bommies I would look out for. I can also see where I used to anchor. And maybe I want to get some greater detail here, so I could try ArcGIS instead. Oh, ArcGIS doesn't have the Bommy data there, it just has the satellite view. So in this case, Google would win. So having the ability to flip between charts, all local on this one system, all available on your helm, all available on your phone, your iPad, whatever you like, it's all right there in front of you. You can also do heading up and north up. I'll just jump back to the boat here. You see a very low res Google, so we'll jump to a nicer one. It did itself. There we go. So yeah, jump back to the boat. We can zoom in and out using buttons. So if your touchscreen is whatever you have, maybe your iPad gets a bit wet, pinch to zoom can be a bit of a problem. So we added these plus and minus buttons to make life a bit easier. And I almost forgot something that is a bit of a sneak preview. This we've been working on for a while. I think we'll have it probably in the next release, to be honest. As in this release coming, Zora 3, we've added in our own weather. So although we have integrations with Predict Wind, Windy, and so on, we have Windy and Meteo Blue as current integrations that you can just bring up as widgets. We've actually added in our own. So you can bring up, let's say, wind. I'll just press and hold to bring up some settings. Incidentally, you may have noticed a tap on anything on Zora will bring up basic information. A tap and hold usually brings up a settings or more information. And here I can get a quick forecast, or I can download a longer form forecast up to 5 days, 1 hour up to 12-hour increments. I'll just do a 3-day, 1 hour forecast and hit apply. Because we're online right now, obviously, Zora's now going to real time go and grab that weather data, overlay it on our current chart. So this is still Google we're looking at, but we can now see our weather on top. And now what's really neat is you'll notice it's currently pulling down quite a lot of frames, 62 total frames for those 1 hour increments over 3 days. But it's doing that for the entire planet, which is really just us showing off. What it means is we can look at the entire planet rather than looking at a grid. If we want to, traditionally you'd sort of pick your radius or your boundaries, your perimeter, and you download a grid for that area. Realistically, you don't need to know the entire planet. You're going to be spent most of your time more local, but it gives you flexibility at any point. You can zoom out and see as far as you wish to work out. Right now, I'm watching cyclone weather, for example. So I can start dragging. Again, this is all fresh data, so it's just going to grab it for me. There we go. And as I do that, you can see it now shows me that weather data real time passing by. And I would hit this play button. It's actually just underneath. I think I can reach it underneath the zoom controls for this Zoom call. But I think if I hit play, yeah, it reached. Good. There's an edit button down there in the way. So you can see a real-time playback. Now, again, you can change what you're seeing here. So we can do opacities. We can see faintly New Zealand in the background there, but I can zoom it down. Sorry, opacity, dim it down, I guess, to see more of my chart. And I can bring it up to be a solid grid as well. You can turn on off contour lines. You can turn off the bars, wind flow, the particles, I suppose you'd call that, and the speed colors as well. So depending on what you want to see, you can customize this to your personal needs. We do that for all the metrics you can see here on the right, as well as wave height and period. We're working on a few other things at the moment. They're all in test. But if you're working at your passage, for example, that's something that's going to be particularly useful is to check what the wave period is going to be over a passage and wave angle, obviously. Um, and actually, on that last point, passage forming, I'll just very basic passage because I realize I'm using up all of our time. So let's just do a very simple passage. We'll just do one quickly out of this river. So I'll just center on the boat and we'll zoom in a bit. So let's say we want to make a passage plan to get ourselves a little bit further down the river here. It's as simple as a press and hold, as I said earlier. So if I press and hold on the chart, it brings up a little option here to say, do you want to make a waypoint, a route, or a straight go-to? Waypoint would be like a point of interest, the rum shop, a particular reef that you like, that kind of thing. The new route is where it gets most interesting. So you see point zero has now been formed, and over here on the right, it's going to start building our route. So I'll just press and hold, press and hold, press and hold. And you can see all of our waypoints are forming. And based on our current speed, which is zero, it's trying to calculate how long it would take us to get there. If I just zoom out for a second and do a bit longer range, maybe I got a bit bold and I tried to go too far, and I can actually add in any waypoints along the route just by pressing holding on the route. Now, once I've selected it, I can drag around the screen. Now, it's kind of hard to show this in a Zoom call, but when I tapped on that waypoint, it's highlighted a color. I can actually tap anywhere on the screen to drag. So if you can see my mouse, I'm going to hold over here on the green field, click and drag, and it's moving my waypoint. That's so that I can actually precisely see where I'm actually moving that waypoint to. We do have a lot of systems out there where you put your finger on that waypoint and move it, but you might not be able to see that you're planting it directly on top of a reef. So you've got that control and flexibility from anywhere on the screen, which is kind of nice. One click and you've deselected the waypoint. Once you've got your route and you're happy with it, you can just hit zoom here to see the whole route. So if I was zoomed in, blue button here, you get to see the whole route. Hit save, and I can give it a quick test 1 to test 2 because I don't know where I'm going to and from. I can add a quick description, and then over under organize, we kind of played around with foldering options. So this is in New Zealand, but that could have been, I don't know, inland passageways, whatever you want to call your foldering. You can make up your own folders. You can tag it. So we could say that this is us going to a boatyard, let's say. You could do as many tags as you like. And then because I started using countries because it seemed to make more sense to me, we actually have every country on the planet here. So this one is in New Zealand. When I hit save, that route has already been saved to my library. I can see that it's in the New Zealand folder. So I can filter down, and I can actually filter by a text search. So show me my tests. I've got some test descriptions in here clearly. I could do it based on the folders. I could choose one of my folders I created. I could use the tags, and I can use the countries. So I can filter down my passages really quickly and find the route I'm looking to do. The other cool thing about this is that right now I'm up here in the north of my chart. Let's say I use this route and I get myself down to the south end of the chart. Well, next time I come into my routes, Zora knows I'm not likely to be going from the north to the south because I'm already in the south. So rather than saving the route again, Zora will automatically reverse it. So it knows from where I am, you're going to be starting over here at point 5 and you're going to be ending at point 0. And it might not come across in Zoom, but there's an animated line here that's actually tracking currently south towards number 5. And if I was down in the south, it would be tracking north up towards number 0. So it's that situational awareness that's key to all of Zora. And I just wanted to touch on that aspect before we kind of summarized everything we can do there in the chart side of things. So that's our routes. Obviously, overlays when we're navigating. I'm just kind of touching on the main things that you should be aware of. Overlays, we can do all the usual things with course over ground lines, heading true, heading magnetic. Your line to target. So if you're off course and drifting, you'll get a new direction that you should be facing your boat. It can give you that as an overlay. You just tap to turn it on. Tack line. Our tack line is actually dynamic. So it's not just a generic, you can do the mirror image of what you're doing right now. It'll actually take into account any current. So if you're getting a really good angle right now, but you're trying to take a port tack to get yourself into the harbor, it'll actually account for current and say, well, actually, don't tack yet. Go another 20 miles. It'll help you because the current's raging at 10 knots. Terrible example, but you know what I mean. And also we turn off our waypoints and so on as well. So all that's hiding under charts, and it's always there. You can have it as a dedicated screen. You can have it under your dynamic screen. And everything in Zora is just a press and hold away. So if I want to change any of my screens, press and hold, and now I'm editing my anchored dynamic screen. I can add widgets from a library. There's power widgets. There's some interfaces for things like no foreign land and fast seas if you use that for your routing. We can bring in cameras. So I don't have one operational right now, I'm afraid, but I actually have a masthead camera. So when we were working through the Tuamotus, you've got coral bommies everywhere. So quite often I'd bring up my masthead camera when I was anchoring, and I could navigate between all the coral bommies, and I could drop the hook right where I wanted it in the sandy patch, and then work our way back from there. So it's kind of handy to have any IP camera fed into your system that way. And then, yeah, if you want to build up a screen of numbers, you're welcome to do so. Switches for lights and all sorts. I'm actually working on, at the moment, having Zora automatically control my navigation lights. Um, so rather than me having to know when I'm motor sailing, when I'm sailing anchored, obviously, it'll actually switch all the lights around for me based on the vessel state. So it's kind of a lazy man's way of navigating at that point. But I thought, why not? It could be fun. Um, all right. That it's a whistle stop. I could talk for days on how Zora actually operates, but that gives you a sense of what Zora can do. You'll want to know the pricing. So this is our pricing at launch. As you can see, you can have just the server, that brain that I showed you earlier, the computer, if you like. That comes loaded up with full Zora, with cloud backup as well. So anything you have on your local storage is backed up, encrypted on our cloud as well, which means you can jump from boat to boat and you could install Zora and then pull your backups down. Or if you upgrade to another system in the future, 10 years from now, when we have Zora 4.0 maybe, you can just keep your cloud backup and away you go. We do also offer it with screens, so you can have 15, 21, 24, and to be honest, we can customize to any screen size you need. But we're launching with these three options and you can see the pricing. What I did was last night I was chatting with the CEO and the CEO, can't say that right, CEO, and they've agreed to give us a discount. So for everyone who's watching this, of course, Posse gets $100 off every system there, so you can save a bit of cash. Just fire an email to, we set up an email address for you as well, so posse at iNav4Ui.com, and with that, we'll have contact with you, and we can give you that discount when you place your order, and we can set it up with installers and so on as well. Um,
Awesome. Oh my
there
God,
we
Ian,
go.
thank you. We really appreciate it. My God, you blew our minds with the in-depth system that you've just demoed. It's
There's a
ironic.
lot of it.
Yeah, it's ironic that you're up that river because on that river down, I actually touched the ground once. So it's kind of,
Yeah, it's really shallow here.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I'm pretty good. I have some questions, but I want to turn it over to Brian. If you stop the screen share, then we get you full screen,
Yes,
please. And Brian
absolutely.
probably
Yep.
has some questions for you.
Ian, thank you very much. And Dietmar, you were very good at summarizing how overwhelming and comprehensive this product is. A couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
Ian, when you were showing the well, I'll call it compass rose, I guess it's called the
Uh,
PND.
yeah.
You see waypoints on that, where a waypoint is?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So I would bring up the screen share again, but yeah, on that compass, you remember I showed you the autopilot and that notch appeared? Well, the waypoint would actually appear on the outside of the compass as a little pin marker, if you like, and it will dynamically move around that compass based on where it actually is. Um, yeah, same as so your waypoint on a route, yeah, your destination essentially will
And
dynamically update.
the acronym PND, that's a
Yes,
display. What does PN stand for?
primary navigation display. Um, Frankly, it doesn't matter. Yeah, the compass screen is fine too.
Yeah.
But
Um, Can the computer hub be connected to other displays such as a Furuno or BNG?
great question. Actually, I had someone ask that just yesterday. So essentially, the way we phrase it is anything that has a web browser on it, you can have Zora on it. So in terms of Furuno and B&G and Raymarine, Furuno, I honestly am not too sure if they have a browser-based option, but I know that B&G and Raymarine disable the browser in their axioms, Axiom and Zeus. So yeah, at this point in time, unfortunately, those are chart plotters made for Raymarine and BNG, and Zora is Zora, made for Zora. So we operate across as many platforms and browser-based devices as we can, but
Do
unfortunately,
you,
BNG and
I'm
Raymarine won't
sorry,
allow it.
Ian, quick question on that. Do you have a video out of your hardware server? Is there a HDMI out or something?
It's a good question as well. So we have looked into it. It is certainly an option. However, at present, what we have is the server, and then you log in through your web browsing option. One option we have had people do is they run a dedicated computer, a NUC, if you like,
Yeah,
and then that would have an HDMI feed out, which could be fed into, yeah, an Axiom Pro or something of that nature if you wish. Yeah. Also,
got
you'd
it.
lose touch control at that point, so it'd be visual only, I suppose. I actually used it on our smart TV. On Passage, we have a TV actually just behind the
Yeah,
laptop here. So if I'm lying down in the saloon here, I can just put on Zora and have basic information up on the screen the whole time.
yeah, great. Smart TV. Go
Uh,
ahead,
last,
Brian. Yeah,
last question. You mentioned that the program can auto log sail changes.
Yes, yeah.
How does that, you're changing your sail, how does it know?
Perfect. Yeah, it's a very good question, and we've had people ask, how does it work it out? So we have toyed with some crazy technology options for the future. Currently, and we won't be changing this, won't be taking this away. When I went to that sidebar and I selected on the Genoa, and it gave me the options for 100% Reef 1, Reef 2, Reef 3. So your manual entry would be to say, I've taken a reef, and you would say Genoa Reef 1. That tells the system essentially what you've just done is you've made a log entry. You've said, I'm taking a reef in Reef 1. The system now logs that and says, okay, you're in Reef 1, and then recalibrates its notifications, those power bars, to match what you've just told it. So, yeah, you're manually telling it at that point. We've toyed with the idea of working with sail manufacturers to have RFIDs baked into your sail. So as you pull in a reef, it would meet a sensor and tell the system. It is completely possible. Zora talks every protocol under the sun, but we've not yet made that arrangement. Let's just put it that way. I even talked about doing it for our dinghy davits, so I'd know whether or not the dinghy was up on the davits. It would meet a sensor, or it was in the water. The dinghy was not present. Yeah, all sorts of sensor options available. That one is certainly one for the future. I have been talking with Cyclops Marine for load sensors on rigs, so we could your rigging could actually tell you when it's time to reef more than the sail shape, or sail load, I should say. And what's the other example to that one that comes to mind? Very early days, but there's a really cool set of electronic winches. They're horribly expensive, but they'll actually do load sensing in the winch as well. So we could actually help with sail trim over time. But ideas for the future.
great. Uh, Brian, what else you got?
Well, it just raises another question.
Oh, cool.
The boat I have, it's been around the world. It's a trawler. I have two boats, but the trawler has been around the world. It's been in New Zealand. It
Oh, great.
all 5 Southern Capes, and at the time,
Wow.
smallest production trawler to do that. And so I thought of upgrading and putting in a variety of monitoring devices. And the person I was talking to said, the boat's been around the world. It did it without any of this information. And so it raises a practical question is you can monitor everything, but is it really needed and is it trouble and expense?
I fully 100% appreciate it as a question. It makes perfect sense to me. And the way I can only answer it is, so I'm on a 20-year-old boat. So our Indioko is a 2005 model. So she's just turned 20, actually. We don't have all the sensors under the sun. And as I tried to point out very early on, Zora is designed that you shouldn't have to look at it. So if you don't want to integrate things, you don't need to. That's the point. So Zora with simple GPS input, depth sensor, and I suppose speed sensor, speed through water sensor. With those three options, you have a basic navigation system. You don't need to have any other sensors on board. If you wish to embellish it with other sensors and feeds from tank monitoring, engines, and so on, go ahead. That's great. We've made it possible. But the point is, you don't need it. I didn't even get into it, but in our charts area, we even have the ability to use traditional chart methods like taking sightings. So if you want to abandon GPS, you could even take sightings, and then we're going to be building in the almanac in a moment, so you can take your sextant, enter the data, and it will help you work out your position. So we've actually built it so that you strip it back to traditional navigation, and then you can bolt on, if you like, more and more advanced options as you see fit. So yeah, hopefully that helps answer.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this.
Oh, great. That's a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, there's a lot to say and a lot to talk about. And being Scottish, I just get faster when I get excited. So apologies if I rattled through it too quickly.
No, it's great. Thank you. All right, I have two questions. The first one is GPX tracks import export.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll turn that into a question. Yeah, you can do both. So if you're, for example, if you're working with GPX from Predict Wind, you can export that,
No,
bring
it's
it
the
straight
Ocean
in.
Posse. We have access to a lot of GPX tracks
Oh,
that we've
yes,
collected through the entire South Pacific,
indeed.
reef passages and things. So we just want to make
Yeah,
sure we can import and export them.
100%. Yeah.
Great.
So yeah, you can import them by a simple click and an import option, and then you
Yeah,
select the file, and there it is. You can then label it and file it the same way I showed you routes.
perfect. Yeah,
So that's ready to go. Export, same thing. Once you've done yours, it exports and we'll embellish it with all the extra data as well. Um,
got it. So you can add, you can augment it with depth data.
oh yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
everything you saw in that history log
Yeah,
or log of entry. What's really
perfect.
neat, it's something we could talk about, this is for Posse to think about,
Yeah,
is because we have an encrypted cloud, it
yeah.
would be possible that individual accounts, memberships to Zora would have access to an encrypted cloud option. So Posse
Yeah.
could store all of those in iNav's cloud if they wish. But we can
Well,
talk
we
about
already
this.
have our own server, but that's fine.
Oh,
That's
fine,
great.
fine.
The
Even better.
second thing is we have about 1.5 terabytes of MB tile data for the whole
Oh,
world
yeah.
for our members now, and we
Yep.
make those available. I assume since you're probably using Leaflet as a draw engine that you can display MB tiles as a
Uh,
data source.
yeah. Yeah, so we have a kind of a translator going on, if you like. So yeah,
Yeah.
we can bring in details in. We would again working through encrypted servers, so we'd have to make sure that was paired through the server, but totally doable.
Yeah, we typically have them locally on hard drives because they're quite large and you
Ah,
don't want to
sorry.
necessarily download them. So a lot of our members will have using OpenCPN for now. Basically, we select the directory for navigation sources, and one of them is by country areas. So
Yeah.
we, as a group, share large MB tiles for all of our
Yeah.
members in our areas of operation.
Sorry, I should clarify when I say through the server, it's still all entirely offline. It would
Yeah,
be for the initial download. That's all I meant.
yeah, got
Yeah.
it.
After that, everything you saw about Zora is offline. The only times you see downloading is, for example, the weather. Obviously, that needs an internet connection, but otherwise, you're an offline platform.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, so I think that answers all of my questions. I'm really stoked for you. First of all, great product, great implementation, good enough pricing for people to be able to afford it and install it. And I can see how the system is obviously growing, and the sky's the limit for you.
Oh yeah.
Lastly, on the multifunctional display, are those PCs? Are those Android? What else can I run on it rather than just having another $3,000 brick on my boat?
Indeed, that's a great question. Yeah, so the platform we have essentially those MFDs they are essentially Linux-based computers.
Yep.
So
Okay, got it.
uh,
Perfect.
yeah, the system I'm using, I do actually have an OpenCPN on there as a system that I've been testing.
Yeah.
Um, I've stopped using anything else but Zora, but of course I'm biased.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I get it. It's it's great. Well, I've run out of questions. Brian, you got anything else before we shut this down? All right. Well, Ian, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for the discount. And we look forward to doing this demo again next year with even more bells and whistles. And we'll make it out. We'll make this video available to our group. So appreciate it. Have fun in Fungaré.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Great. Cheers.